The stress of always needing to read the room. Welcome to Change the Conversation with the Hopefulist. My name is Wendy McClure, and it's time we had a conversation about living in a patriarchy and how that affects our lives. Together, we can make a difference and change the conversation. Thank you so much for being here. I applaud you and celebrate you for being here and for wanting to make a difference in this world for not only yourself, but for your daughters and your granddaughters and all of the women that come behind us, not just the ladies, for the men too. Talking about living in a patriarchy, it is not only detrimental to women to live in such a system, it is detrimental to men as well. So I thank you, and I am very honored to have you here today. I wanted to start off with a quote, which is more like a little paragraph to start out the podcast. Now, here's where we get confused when it comes to boundaries. We want to be nice, to bring joy to others, to be good, helpful, agreeable, compassionate, popular people. And we think that compromising our boundaries is the best way to meet those needs. We mistakenly perceive boundaries to be a bad, mean, unbending barrier that keeps others out. We fear that setting a boundary means we're cutting ourselves off from others, delivering an ultimatum, putting up a wall, being demanding, controlling, rigid, and worst of all, selfish. Clearly defining who you are and what you're available for is not selfish. So think of those words and do what I always encourage you to do. Speak your truth. Today we're going to be talking about why you may always feel on edge, why you may always have to be constantly reading the room. Now, as we grow up as children, there's a lot of dynamics in each family situation. If you were in a situation where you had to constantly worry about how somebody in the family was going to react or act in a certain way, that meant that you learned from a very early age that you had to curtail your actions in order to stop someone else from behaving in a way that you did not want. What do I mean? Did you have an explosive parent? A lot of these situations are when it comes to the father in a relationship. They get home from work, they're in a bad mood, they had a bad day, and the mom's running around, don't bother your father, he's going to read the paper, he's going to have a beer, don't bother your father, don't bother your father. So you're constantly drilled into your head that you have to figure out his mood when he walks in the door. Is he in a good mood? Okay, I might be able to talk to him. I might be able to continue doing what I'm doing and have fun. Or does he look like he's in a bad mood? Okay, then I gotta clear out, maybe go to my bedroom and just hang out there so that I don't get on his nerves. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of the mothers / wives in this situation encourage this behavior for the main reason that they don't want to set him off, because then that makes life difficult for everybody. So you're constantly having to tiptoe around somebody. You're constantly having to read what mood they are in so that you can act accordingly. And a lot of people grow up this way. And it's not really the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be free to be who you are. You shouldn't have to tone yourself down or become less of who you are, or especially fade into the background for somebody else because you're afraid. Now, this happens a lot in families. It's not just fathers. Mothers can be very explosive as well. And when I was growing up, my father tended to drink a lot. And when he would come home from work, we were often told, be good, stay in your room, you know, don't start trouble. Like, it all hinged on what was going on in his world. And, I have some pretty strong memories from that time in my life. But even after my parents split up, then my mom became very explosive in her behavior and in her reactions. It was very much the same situation where if she came home from work in a bad mood, we would all have to be on guard. We would all have to watch what we said, watch what we did. We had to make sure we had to do everything exactly the right way, or there was just big trouble. Some examples that come to the forefront of my mind is, I'm Gen X. We grew up with one television. We had one television in the living room for the entire family. And I remember, when we got home from school, we would watch cartoons. And I remember my mom laying on the couch. That's typically where she sat. She was on the couch and she was laying down. I guess she fell asleep. And we started laughing at something that had happened on the television and woke her up. And she screamed at us. She screamed at us for laughing. These are things that are a little bit a traumatic situation that stick with you. But it also teaches you that you have to hold back. It teaches you that I have to make sure to check and see if mom is sleeping before I have the audacity to laugh at something that's taking place in the living room where the TV is, where we're supposed to watch TV, yet she fell asleep and we got in trouble for watching the TV and reacting to it. So this is just one example of many situations where you are constantly evaluating the people in the room, what their mood is, and how you have to adjust yourself to compensate for that. And this is not the way it's supposed to be. It's the way it is in a lot of cases. And this carries into adulthood. It really is a way to describe why you might be anxiety-filled all the time. Are you in a situation where you have to worry about the mood of your spouse when they get home, the mood of your kids when they get home? Of course, you're always curious about their mood. You want to know how their day was, but are you afraid? I think that's kind of the difference. Even when my husband has a bad day at work, he doesn't take it out on me. He might come home and be like, yeah, I had a real job today. And he might want to let off some steam, but he doesn't expect me to change who I am or my behavior because of the bad day that he had. A little extra compassion, sure. But I'm never afraid when he says I've had a bad day, where I was when I was younger. And what it has done, like I've mentioned, is conditioned a lot of us to read the mood of people that are around us so that we know how to act. It's a form of self-protection, but it's also a form of hiding our true selves. So what we have learned, especially in women, is to tone ourselves down, to become smaller, to become more quiet, to not start trouble. And we take that so far in our lives, this conditioning that we get when we are young, that we need to tone ourselves down. And it happens in school. There's a study I read recently that talked about the difference between boys in class and girls in class. And I like to think that this is changing now, but it probably was the case when I was going to school, is that teachers even treated boys differently than they treated girls. that when a boy would volunteer an answer at school, even if it was the wrong answer, the teacher would often say, okay, yeah, but also it could be this. And so they gave them that positive reinforcement and then told them what the answer truly was. But they got that little bit of positive reinforcement where in most cases, when a girl guessed the wrong answer, she was just told, no, that's not correct. And what this does is, since the boy got positive feedback, even though the answer wasn't right, was the encouragement to continue to try. And when the girls didn't get the same treatment, didn't get the same positive feedback, it leads them to stay quiet, to not take the chance to be wrong again, because that's embarrassing and they don't want to be embarrassed. And that even leads to when there are discussions in class that boys will often lead the discussion because they're more outspoken, just for the reasons that I mentioned. And there's so much that could be done differently in our education system. I saw a video where in other countries, when there's a student that doesn't understand what is being explained in class, say it be a math problem or something, instead of ostracizing the people who don't understand, they encourage them to speak out. They bring them up to the board and have them work the problem out in front of the whole class. And the whole class contributes to how to work that problem out. When they see somebody making, no. See, that's what you're doing. You forgot to carry the one, or something to that effect. That is what we should be doing here. Instead of shaming our kids for having a wrong answer, we should be showing them how to come up with the right answer. Right? Doesn't it seem to make so much more sense? But this is just one of the many reasons that women, girls, tone themselves down, because they don't want to put themselves out there for ridicule. Another reason that girls are encouraged to tone it down is for their own safety. And mothers teach their girls to tone themselves down, because the quieter you are, the less likely you are to be noticed, which means that you will be safer from danger because you're not going to be noticed as much. Because when you speak out and you say what you feel and what you think, and people disagree with you, that could potentially put you in danger. You know, I've always been pretty outspoken. And I remember often my mother telling me when I was young, your big mouth is going to get you in trouble one of these days. So she would, in that sense, encourage me to keep my mouth shut for fear that I would get in trouble someday. You know, in an ideal world, and I'm sure that I was annoying her. I'm sure that I was, making her mad, and that's why she spouted that out the way that she did. But again, it's a conditioning to keep quiet. The threat of myself getting in trouble because I'm saying what I feel is the wrong message to be sending. We need to be encouraging our girls to speak up, to say what they feel. And this is the hard part, to take, not rejection, but, take the failure of a certain problem or being wrong in class, not as the humiliating situation that it can be looked at as of now, but as a learning experience. We make our girls so small. We tell them to be quiet. We tell them to fade into the background. We tell them to be polite. We tell them that they need to get along with everybody. We have toned our girls' into nothingness, that they now don't feel like they have the right to say or do anything that they truly want because they don't feel safe to do it, because they have been conditioned that they are not safe from the time that they were very young. And in some cases, that is true. There was a study that was done recently that asked women, what would you do if there were no men in the world for 24 hours? Predominantly, what women said is they would take a walk at night. Women can't even take walks at night for fear of being hurt. And again, this is the result of a patriarchal society, that men are so, I don't want to use the word entitled, but it's just so common that women need to protect themselves against men when they're out at night, that we question the women at that point. Well, why are you walking around in the dark? Well, because I felt like going for a walk. Why is it that the blame is being put on the woman for having the nerve to want to go for a walk at night? Like, this is what happens in a patriarchy. It's not the man's fault for attacking her. It's the woman's fault for leaving the house in the first place. That, my friend, is patriarchy. I'm not saying that the man's not going to get in trouble, but they try to victim blame and put part of the responsibility on the woman for walking at night in the dark. This is what we've been conditioned to believe, that we need to follow all of the rules in order to keep ourselves safe. And that may be true. We may need to follow all the rules to keep ourselves safe. But that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to change the conversation around the rules so that maybe someday a woman can go for a walk at night and not be afraid. Another thing that may have conditioned you as a child is the way that you were treated by your parents. And what I mean by that is how were you treated when it came to the things that you needed? Were you given everything freely? Was your parent one that, sat down and asked you, what is it that you need? What is it that would make you happy? What is it that would make you feel good? That type of thing. And if you were given those things freely, you probably are in a good space. You probably have a nice sense of self-worth, and you feel free to be who you are because you were encouraged to be that as you were growing up. Speaking for myself, is I often felt like I was tolerated, like what my needs were inconvenient to the others, to my parents in my family. If I needed to be taken to a practice, or if there was a trip at school and I had to get a permission slip signed, even that was kind of an annoyance. Ugh, all right, fine, I'll sign it. Like that type of thing, which led me to not want to ask for things. It led me to not want to be the bother. And it didn't, lead it to it all that much, because I still kept my mouth in there. I kept saying what I wanted. But a lot of times this really holds girls and women back. They don't want to be put in a position to constantly be on edge and to be constantly fighting. So they just hold themselves back. They don't ask to go to practice. They don't join things that are just going to require practice, that's going to require a ride to and from practice. And again, things are different now. Parents go to practice, which is so crazy to me because when I was in school, I was in the band and we had at the least 2 practices a week. And then typically we had a football game and then we would have a competition. So that would be 4 times a week. There is no way my mom was coming to sit at our 3-hour practices. And then in addition to it just wasn't going to happen. So I don't know if parents go to all the practices now, or it seems to me like they do. I could be mistaken. But things are a lot different now. We already know that girls are encouraged to be sweet and nice and polite and respectful. And this can be dangerous for women too, that for girls and for women, but especially for girls, because it could set them up in a situation, especially when you're talking about, respecting your elders. It puts them in a position to discount their own intuition. Like they could find themselves in a situation that is a bad situation. And because they've been encouraged to be polite and to be respectful, they may ignore that inner warning, that inner intuition that something is not right, something that normally would tell them to get away, get out of the situation. They now feel like that they can't because that wouldn't be polite and it wouldn't be respectful. So these are the kinds of things that we really need to be changing for our girls that are turning into women in this country. So what can we do in the meantime? Well, step into your own. Learn your truth and speak it loudly. Be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself because, and I believe this is Dr. Seuss, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter. Not positive it's Dr. Seuss, but I think it is. I want you to ask for what you need. Go find what is missing in your life and find a way to fulfill those needs. We all have needs. You are entitled to have your needs met. And if you're not getting them met now, after asking for them, then you need to find a way to have them met. I want you to stand for what you believe in. You will never be steered in the wrong direction when there is conviction in your heart. If you believe something wholeheartedly and your gut is telling you this is right, that will not steer you wrong. That will lead you to the stances that you want to have in life, to your truth and to your purpose. You can feel the conviction in your heart. And as I have told you before, I am more my true, authentic self now than I have ever been. And I cannot tell you what a different life it feels like. I feel like there is a purpose. I feel like I am here to do something, and I am working toward that. And I have a vision of my life in the future, and I am working toward that. I am taking steps and strides towards it every single day. And I feel really good about myself. I feel happy. I feel content. I feel satisfaction. I feel excitement. I feel like there is so much to come and so much that is happening right now that I am looking forward to and enjoying. And there is just nothing in the world than being truly yourself and accepting that. And I know that because I spent most of my life not accepting who I was, not even liking who I was. And life is a whole different ballgame now that I accept and love myself. And I've said this before, I think the best part of loving yourself is that you just know that you're always going to be okay. If you lose friends, you're going to be okay. If there are, dust ups with loved ones, you're going to be okay. If you have something happen inside your marriage, you're going to be okay. You know in your heart that you will always be okay because you trust yourself. You trust yourself to figure out whatever it is that needs to be done to make it okay for you. And that is the beauty of being your true, authentic self. And that is my wish for you. I want you to live a life that matters. So please go to my website, Hopefulist.com. Take a look around there. And if you like today's episode, please leave me a review and share it with your friends. You can just copy the URL for this podcast, send it right to a friend. Feel free to share it on social media. I will be your best friend. And now I want you to go out there and be badass. Live a life that matters. I'm always here cheering you on. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. Together, we are better. Please visit my website at hopefulist.com and remember to hit that subscribe or follow button.